Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant, how that all our fathers were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Hamashiach. But with many of them God was not well pleased, for they were overthrown in the wilderness. Now these things were our examples, to the intent we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. Neither be ye idolaters, as were some of them. As it is written, the people sat down to eat and drink, and rose up to play. Neither let us commit fornication, as some of them committed, and fell in one day 23,000. Neither let us tempt Hamashiach, as some of them also tempted, and were destroyed of serpents. Neither murmur ye, as some of them also murmured, and were destroyed of the destroyer. Now all these things happened unto them for ensamples, and they are written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the world are come. Wherefore, let him that thinketh he standeth take heed lest he fall. There hath no temptation taken you, but such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that ye may be able to bear it. Wherefore, my dearly beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to wise men, judge ye what I say. Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Barakatah Yahweh Shai, Barakatah Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Ba Racha HaKodash, Kol Thapa Arath, Hawad Wahaloyam, Ratwatam Yatla, Allah Hayanawa, Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, Ba Racha HaKodash. And what I just said in the Lashon Kodash being the ancient Paleo-Hebrew, or in other words, the true biblical Hebrew for holy tongue or language. And what I just said is all glory, honor, and praises abundantly and continuously to our power, Yahweh, the true name of our Heavenly Father, who the world ignorantly and incorrectly calls God, in the name of his only begotten Son, our Savior, our Messiah, our Deliverer, Yahweh Shai, Hamashiach, who the world ignorantly and incorrectly calls Jesus Christ, and, or in other words, through the Holy Spirit. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Much peace, love, and respect to the brothers teaching and pushing this truth out the four corners of the earth, to the hopeful elect, the 144,000 and the 1/3, as well as the rest of the elect scattered abroad amongst the heathen nations to the four corners of the earth, east, north, south, and west. To you I say shalom. This is your brother Ra'ib Tazadakwa coming back at you again, all through the spirit and power of Yahweh, Bahashem Yahweh Shai, with another lesson. Yahweh Ratazah is going to be edifying and encouraging to you Achim and in the Achwaf, brothers and sisters that may be listening and or watching. Now tonight, this is going to be part 53 in the ongoing lesson series you see here at the top of the screen. For God so loved the world being the main title, and then the applicable part. Tonight is part 53, and then a subtitle which more specifically speaks to exactly what we're getting into that night, which it all is building and supporting the main point of this entire lesson series, which is that salvation is only for Israel, okay? And that would be Israel according to their lineage, their heritage, their bloodline, all right, through their fathers by birth, all right, and bloodlines are always pure, passed down through the fathers. In case you didn't know it, one of the purposes or functions, rather, that's the best word I'm looking for, functions of the placenta is to keep the blood of the mother and to keep the blood of the baby in that mother's womb completely and totally separate at all times. Okay, the blood of the mother and the blood of the baby never mixes. There's no such thing as mixed blood. That is a physiological fact. All right, the medical industry, they know that. Okay, most mothers know that. All right, and those that are in the I believe it's called gynecology, where you give birth and all that, midwives, they all know that. Okay, but for whatever reason, there's like a disconnect between that information, which is commonly known in the medical field, commonly known in the specialty area of having to do with giving birth to babies, commonly known there. But when you get outside of that field or that area, it's like people don't know that anymore. Okay, but it is a physiological fact. Okay, there is no such thing as mixed blood. You are who your father is. Bloodlines are always pure, passed down through the fathers. You are of the race, you are of the nation, you are of the family of your father. Your fathers, really, but your father. Because if you trace it back up through your fathers, your father, your father's father, your grandfather, your great-grandfather, your great-great-grandfather, your great-great-great-grandfather, all the way up back up, and you get to Jacob, and then to Isaac, and then to Abraham, you're an Israelite. And really, you can stop at Jacob, because if you get to Jacob, then obviously you go back through Isaac and Abraham as well. Okay, and it doesn't matter what you look like. Okay, because genetics and bloodlines are two totally separate things. Bloodlines, that determines who you are. Okay, your bloodline, I should say singular, determines who you are, right? And genetics, that simply impacts what you look like. And there is a normal, typical way for each of the nations to look, but that can be changed, that can be altered, that can be affected by mixing genetics, which that's where your mother comes in. Your mother comes in because she does provide half or so of the genetics, and she also nourishes the baby, provides nourishment, genetics and nourishment. That's what she does. Bloodlines, she has nothing to do with that. Nothing to do with that. You are who your father is. And this used to be commonly known, but we live in a time of common ignorance, right? And so it's not so much common knowledge anymore. But then again, it is, because like I already told you, the medical area, the medical industry, the medical, whatever you want to call it, they know that, especially when you get into, the area of gynecology and giving birth and all that. They know that. Midwives, they all know that. A lot of mothers know that. Okay, they know what the placenta does. But somehow there's a disconnect between that clear physiological information, which is acknowledged, and how that applies to races and bloodlines and all that. Somehow there's a disconnect there, which it's gross darkness, Isaiah 60:2, and great confusion, 2 Ezra 16. That's what it is, right? So there is no such thing as spiritual Israelites according to the scriptures, unless you're talking about the context of spiritual Israelites versus carnal Israelites. In that context, yes. But if you're talking about in the context of natural-born heathen being spiritually Israelites, natural-born heathen that do not go back to Jacob, okay, even though they may go back to Isaac, there is one heathen nation that does, but not back to Jacob. Okay, where's one heathen nation that goes back to Abraham and Isaac, but not Jacob. Okay, it's still a heathen nation then. You got to go back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Or you can say Jacob for simplicity's sake. Okay, all right. Or if you're talking about one of the nations that goes back to Abraham, by the way, not all nations go back to Abraham. Okay, all right. But there are some that go back to Abraham. If you talk about, you got Ishmael and you got Edom for right off the bat. That's two right there, right? Okay. They can also, both of them can also claim, in addition to us, can also claim Abraham as their forefather. Okay, the Ishmaelites and the Edomites. Although the Edomites can't really do it because they've been rejected. They're reprobate. They're bastards. Okay, all right. But their bloodline does go back through Abraham and Isaac. Okay, so, but if you're a natural born heathen that does not go back to Jacob, and also by necessity Isaac and Abraham, all three, then you're a natural born heathen. There's no such thing, and there's nowhere in the scriptures anywhere where there's any precedence for any such thing as a spiritual Israelite that's a natural born heathen. It's not in the Bible anywhere. I'll tell you what is in the Bible. What is in the Bible, and that's what we've been getting into since part 15, and this is part 53. It only took one part to establish it. All right, because we got 3 precepts. We got 2, and then later on, actually much later, we got a 3rd. Okay, and the two precepts we only needed 1, but we got 2. Is St. John 7:35 and Matthew 18:17. And then later on, maybe about, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 parts ago, we added another one to it that does the same thing, which is Genesis 15:13. All 3 of those precepts individually by itself proves that there's 2 groups of Gentiles, 2 groups of heathen, 2 groups of foreigners, 2 groups of strangers. All right, and you can even say, if you wanted to, you could say 2 groups of Greeks, 2 groups of Greeks, right? And that's important for Romans 10 and 12 and Galatians 3 and 28. And what's that? Colossians 3 and 11, I think, or 12. Let me just get that real quick before we get into this 1 Corinthians 10. Colossians 3 and 11 or 12. 11, yeah. There you go. See? There are the actual Greeks, and then there are Greeks here in those 3 precepts I just told you about, which are actually Israelites. And that's the history we've been getting in the past, say, part 52 aside. I think part 51 was the last part we got into the history about how many of our people were forcibly made to abandon our ways and abandon our heritage and adopt the customs of the Greeks, and even to call themselves Greeks under penalty of death. Okay, so these were not true Greeks. These were Israelites who were adopting the customs and manners of the Greeks and no longer referring to themselves as Israelites. They were calling themselves Greeks for fear of their life. All right. And so in those 3 precepts, these Greeks here are Israelites, and we got the history about how that happened in 1 Maccabees, the 1st chapter. We went to 2 Maccabees, the 6th chapter, and we also got 2 Maccabees, the 7th chapter, and we got a lot of that history. It's very important to understand that, so that when you get to these precepts here, you know that these Greeks that the Apostle Paul is writing to are the descendants of the Israelites that became Greeks. So this is 5, 6, 7 or so, somewhere thereabouts, generations later. These Israelites are the descendants of the Israelites that abandoned our ways for fear of their life and adopted the customs of the Greeks, forsook calling themselves Israelites, Judeans, and began to call themselves Greeks. So these Greeks are the descendants of those that did that. These Greeks are Israelites by lineage, by heritage, by bloodline, by birth. The believers, the Gentiles, the foreigners, the heathen, the strangers, the Greeks that the Apostle Paul was the apostle to were Israelites. And we've proved that many times already. And we're going to prove it some more tonight. All right. And so there are 2 groups. There is precedence in the scriptures for a such thing as Israelites being spiritually Gentiles, spiritually foreigners, spiritually strangers, spiritually heathen, and being referred to as such, although they are Israelites. You do have that in the Bible, but it does not go the other way around. That is nowhere in the scriptures. This is the mystery of the Gentiles. So we've been laying a lot of groundwork and foundational work, and we're still doing that, because we've established that there's 2 groups of Gentiles, foreigners, heathens, and strangers, 2 groups of Greeks even, and one would be the natural born, the other group would be Israelites, right? We've established that. And so we're continuing to work that point home, drive that point home. We just wrapped up the history, like I said, and now we wrapped up Galatians, the 3rd chapter, in part 52. We wrapped up Romans, the 9th chapter, also in part 52, because we broke down the whole chapter of Romans 9. We broke down a good chunk of the end, I'd say maybe 8, 9 or so verses of Galatians 3 at the end of the chapter. And I think we also got some above that as well. And now we're going back to Ephesians 2, which is what sent us to Romans 9, which sent us to Galatians 3. So since we've wrapped those up, now we're going back to Ephesians 2 to finish that up. But before we do, I want to get into this 1 Corinthians 10, because all of the believers at Rome, all of the believers at Colossae, all of the believers at Corinth, all of the believers at Galatia, all of the believers at Ephesus, all of the believers at Philippi, all of the believers at Thessalonica, they were all Israelites by lineage, by heritage, by bloodline, by birth, by bloodline, through the lineage, through the bloodline of their fathers. They were all Israelites, being referred to as Gentiles, foreigners, heathen, strangers, and Greeks. Okay? And we proved that many times in this lesson series, and we're going to prove it again tonight here in 1 Corinthians 10. It should have already been obvious to you, but in case it's not, I'm going to point it out. And then we're going to go to Ephesians 2 and prove that the believers at Ephesus were Israelites. Salvation is only for Israel. Okay? Moreover, brethren, I would not that ye should be ignorant. Okay? Now, first thing I want to point out to you, this word brethren. Okay? The pagan Christians today use this word brethren. They use this word brethren to mean anyone and everyone, no matter who they are, no matter what nation, what race, what family, what bloodline they have. None of that. As long as they believe or say they believe the same thing that the pagan Christians believe, well, then you're my brother. Okay? They use it to meet, the basis for them, the basis for them referring to and calling someone their brother rests solely on whether or not they share the same belief. That is not how it's used in the scriptures at all. Now, that is one of the criteria. Although, even if you don't check that box, all right, even if you don't check that box, but you do check the other box, well, or in a certain context or in a certain level, that person's still your brother, even if they check the first box. Okay, which I haven't said what the first box is, but it should be obvious. The first box is you're of the same race, the same family, the same nation. Okay, you share the same forefathers. Well, that's one of the boxes that's required to be checked. Okay, and if you check that one, but you don't check the next box, well, then that person's still your brother, but in the context that the Apostle Paul is using it, you would need to check both boxes. You would also, in addition to checking the box of sharing the same forefathers, you would also need to check the box of having the same belief. Okay? The same faith, the same belief in Yahweh and Yahweh Shai. Okay? So when the Apostle Paul refers to the believers at Corinth as brethren, or any of the believers at any of these churches as brethren, he's saying that not only because they're Israelites, I'm going to say it the other way around, not only because they believe the same thing he believes, but also because they're Israelites. It is not sufficient. Under no context would somebody be referred to as your brother when they only believe what you believe, but they don't share the same forefathers. That's not, no. There's no context where that's applicable. The brother or brethren is never used that way. Okay? It's never used that way. Now, you can say somebody's your brother if they share the same forefathers, but they don't believe the same thing that you believe, but that's not how this is being used. When the Apostle Paul refers to somebody as his brother, he's saying they're his brother because they have the same forefathers and they believe the gospel of the kingdom. All right? See? So you got the first box that needs to be checked, same forefathers. Second box that needs to be checked, believe the gospel of the kingdom. Believe the same thing. All right? And when the Apostle Paul is using the word brethren, he's saying that because both of the boxes are checked. Now, if you check the first box but not the second box, well, then yes, that person's still your brother, right? In a certain context, because you share the same forefathers, but not, you can't call them your brother in the manner in which the Apostle Paul means it. So yes, they still your brother, but that's not how the Apostle Paul's saying it. Well, what if the first box is not checked, but the second box is checked? No context would you call that person your brother. And the heathen ain't going to believe it anyway. Okay, so you're never going to be in any situation like that. But what you will do is you will be in a situation where the heathen will try to cling to us. They'll try to get in on our action with our blessings and stuff like that. You do see that in the scriptures. Okay, all right. The woman at the well is an example of that. Those that came up to what's his name? Escaping me right now. Name's escaping me right now. It's almost coming back to me, man. Hold on a second. I'm trying to remember it now. It's escaping me right now. But oh man. Hold on a second. Now I'm curious, because I'm having a hard time remembering. Let's see here. Yes. For some reason, I can't remember his name right now. Zerubbabel, there it is. Zerubbabel, right. That's another example. They came up to Zerubbabel and some of the other chiefs and elders of the people. And so here, let's just, since I couldn't remember his name for whatever reason, let's just go ahead and read it real quick. Now, when the adversaries of Judah and notice that, adversaries, enemies. So who's that? Well, when you understand the scriptures, the second Psalm, the 83rd Psalm, I believe it also makes it plain in Ezekiel 36, Baruch the 4th chapter, and other places. Our enemies are all the heathen nations. So when it says the adversaries of Judah and Benjamin, that's talking about the heathen. Heard that the sons of the captivity, that's us, the Israelites, builded the temple unto Yahweh, power of Israel. Then they came to Zerubbabel and to the chief of the fathers and said, chief of the fathers of our nation, the leaders of Israel, all right, Zerubbabel being number one, and said unto them, let us build with you, which if you can receive it, Zerubbabel is Malach Dawadah, King David, who also later was Peter. And said unto them, that's if you can receive it, let us build with you. Yeah, let us build with you. Let us participate. For we seek your God, as ye do, and we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assur. In other words, since the Assyrian captivity. Because if you remember, the northern kingdom was moved out of their land, and heathen were moved into the land, and those heathen were doing heathen abominable things, wicked things in the Holy Land. Our father was not keen on that, so he sent lions into the land, because that's our father's favorite land, and you can't just come in there and do whatever you want. So our father sent lions into the land to terrorize the people, and the people cried out to the king, and the king took one of our priests and sent one priest back into the land to teach the heathen how to keep the laws, at least well enough. You know they wasn't doing it perfect. You know they wasn't doing it right. And you know they wasn't doing it out of a heart of worship for the Heavenly Father. They was doing it so that the lions wouldn't keep feasting on them. But they did it just well enough. Okay, they wasn't doing it great, but they did it well enough that our Father, Yahweh, stopped sending the lions into the land. And those people, once the Assyrian captivity was over, the northern kingdom did not return back to the land. You can read about how in 2nd Ezra 13, verses 38, 39 down to 47 or so, they came over here to the Americas. So they never returned back to that land. Those heathens stayed in the land. See, that's why they say, I'm here, and we do sacrifice unto him since the days of Esarhaddon, king of Assur. All right. And let me see here. Esarhaddon, what did they put for that? Just doing a little study here. Okay. Ashur has given a brother. 7th century. Okay. So anyway, so these heathen that had been in the land, they wanted to participate, but they were heathen. That's why they're identified in verse 1 as our enemies, adversaries, enemies. Okay? Which brought us up hither, right? Because he's the one that put them in the land. He displaced the northern kingdom and put heathen in our land, the land that was belonged to the northern kingdom. But Zerubbabel and Jeshua and the rest of the chief of the fathers of Israel said unto them, absolutely, come on in. Hey, the heathen can get in on this action too. Ye have nothing to do with us to build an house unto our power. Salvation is only for Israel. You have nothing to do. It has nothing to do with you. Okay? You may have no part in this work. We alone will build the temple for Yahweh, the power of Israel, just as King Cyrus of Persia commanded us. But we ourselves together will build unto Yahweh power of Israel, as King Cyrus the king of Persia hath commanded us. Then, well, since they couldn't get in on the action, what did they do? The people of the land weakened the hands of the people of Judah and troubled them in building, because they're our enemies. They were always our enemies. And they're never going to stop being our enemies until we subjugate them in the kingdom of heaven. Okay? And just because they were coming up to look to try to build and participate, that didn't mean that they weren't our enemies. They are our enemies. All right? And it's always going to manifest at some point. Even if we'd have been stupid enough to say, oh yeah, come on, our Father Yahweh ain't going to allow that, and he isn't going to go, well, since my sons and my daughters are, specifically my sons, because the sons are making the decisions here. Well, since my sons are okay and they're letting these heathen come on in, I guess I'll open up the covenants to the heathens too. No, our Father Yahweh wasn't going to do that, never. Okay, so anyway, I don't remember what got me off onto that, but let me get over here into this 1 Corinthians 10. Okay, and I think that's right, brethren, right? Because in order to be brethren, when the Apostle Paul says, moreover, brethren, he's talking about Israelites, number one, and those that believe the gospel of the kingdom, number two. Okay, although Israelites that don't believe the gospel of the kingdom are also brethren, he's not talking about that. He's not talking about that. Because really, you got to understand that not all Israel is of Israel. So even if they are brothers in a bloodline sense, if they don't believe the gospel of the kingdom, they're not brothers. You got to understand that. So when the Apostle Paul says brethren, he's never is that used to refer to heathen that believe what we believe. Never. Okay? But not even is he referring to brothers as just being those that share the same bloodline. He's not even talking about that. That's part of it. That's number one. Number two, he's also talking about those that believe the gospel of the kingdom. It's important to understand that, because pagan Christianity, with a subtle little shift, a subtle little change that wouldn't seem to be so significant, they change it totally changes everything. Well, you're my brother. It doesn't matter who your forefathers are. Only thing that matters is what you believe. Wrong. Okay? In order to be brothers in the sense that the Apostle Paul means it, you have to be of the same bloodline, of the same lineage, and believe the gospel of the kingdom. You need both boxes checked. So that right there, when you have that understanding, tells you that these are Israelites. But I know you need more, but still, I wanted to point that out. I would not that ye should be ignorant, meaning without knowledge, not to know, how that all the hour is a possessive pronoun that includes the one who's speaking and those that are listening. Who's speaking? The Apostle Paul, writing, I should say, but you know what I mean. The Apostle Paul is writing. Who's he writing to? The believers at Corinth. Okay. So when he says our, it's talking about him and the believers at Corinth. Now, you can read back and you can read ahead, read the whole book of 1 Corinthians. Anywhere in here, does he dismiss a portion of the believers at Corinth? Does he say anywhere in here, hey, you believers at Corinth, because I know most people would say, well, there may have been some Israelites mixed in with the believers at Corinth, but it was predominantly or mostly a heathen congregation. That's what they would say, right? Okay. But there may have been some actual Israelites mixed in because, hey, look, pagan Christianity does acknowledge, they don't talk about it too much, but they will acknowledge that, hey, there was some Israelites that were being called, Helen. They'll acknowledge it. But what they won't admit is that that's all of them, okay? So they'll acknowledge that there may have been some Israelites mixed in amongst the churches at Ephesus, Corinth, and Rome and all that. They'll acknowledge that. Okay, but let's go with that for a second. Is there anywhere in here in the book of 1 Corinthians where the Apostle Paul dismisses the actual heathen believers at Corinth? Is there anywhere here where he dismisses a portion of the congregation and says, well, let me just speak to you who are believers at Corinth. Let me just speak to you Israelite believers at Corinth. No. The point I'm making to you here is that he's speaking to the whole congregation. He's writing to the whole congregation. He's writing this to all the believers at Corinth. There is no distinction. There is no separation. There is no partial division. This is to the whole church at Corinth, everybody. And he says here how that all our fathers were under the cloud and all passed through the sea. So he's saying all of our fathers were delivered from ancient Egypt. That makes them all Israelites. All right, the deliverance from ancient Egypt was for Israel. And were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, and did all eat the same spiritual meat, which is the manna, the spiritual food, angels' food, and did all drink the same spiritual drink, for they drank of that spiritual rock. Right? Remember Moses, the water flowed from the rock. Okay, which is a metaphor, a representation of Yahushua. Okay, the chief cornerstone that the builders rejected. Okay, and from him flows water, the water of life, right? Which is the scriptures, the word, from which when we drink, we'll never thirst again. Okay, for they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them, and that rock was Hamashiach. This is all Israel. And he says, all our fathers were under the cloud. All our fathers passed through the sea. All our fathers were Israelites. So that makes you all Israelites too. Because we already went through that. You are who your father is. Oh yeah, I forgot to get your precept on that. I already explained it to you physiologically, but I meant to get your precept on it. What's that? Numbers 10? No, not 10. What's that? 1. Numbers 1. Okay. Take ye this, and this is in here multiple times, but we only need to see it once. Take ye the sum of all the congregation of the sons, Hebrew word banyam, it is indeed gender specific, of Israel, after their families, by the house of their mothers. No. My bad. Let me back it up. By the house of their mothers and fathers. My bad. By the house of their fathers and mothers? No. By the house of their fathers. Point blank, period. End of discussion. Okay? You are who your father is, with the number of their names, every male by their polls. And it's in here multiple times, but that's all you need to see. It's all determined by your father. Mother has nothing to do with that. Nothing. Zero. So when we go back over here, see, this is all Israel. The only thing you could say is, but there is the mixed multitude. So I think they're talking about the mixed multitude too. Well, look, there was a mixed multitude, but the mixed multitude did not enter into the covenant. Okay? There was a mixed multitude, but what did the mixed multitude do? And look, the mixed multitude, what were they going to do? They were going to be servants. That's it. They're going to be servants. Okay? When we were delivered from ancient Egypt, the mixed multitude came along to be servants. That's what they were going to do. Just like when we're delivered from modern day spiritual Egypt, which is America, Babylon the Great, and really more specifically when our people are gathered from around the four corners of the earth. I'm talking about those that are not in areas that are going to be hit by the thermonuclear destruction. Okay, they're going to be brought to the land of Israel by the heathen. Okay, and when the heathen bring them to the land of Israel, where the heathen going to be? In the land of Israel. And what's going to happen to the heathen? They going to remain. They're not going to say, well, we're glad you got here. Okay, we'll see you later. No, they're going to stay there and be what? Slaves, men servants, and maid servants. Isaiah 14:2. You can also get this in Isaiah 60. Okay. And the people, that's the heathen, the nations, the NLT does a good job there. The nations of the world will help Yahweh's people to return. Back to the KJV. And the people, the heathen nations, shall take them, and them is the Israelites, and bring them to their place, the land of Israel. And the house of Israel, those that they just brought to their place, shall possess. They ain't going to help. They're going to do it. They're going to bring us there. Okay? The first act of service. Okay? And the house of Israel, those Israelites that they just returned to the land, shall possess them. They not going back home. They're going to stay there. The first act of service is to bring the Israelites to their land, and then they're going to serve them the rest of their life as their men servants and maid servants. In other words, slaves. Shall possess them in the land of Yahweh for servants and handmaids. Okay? Let me see here. And they shall take them captives, slaves, whose captives they were. Because we're in slavery and bondage and servitude to the heathen nations right now. And they shall rule over their oppressors. Israel will rule over its enemies. The heathen nations. So how y'all going to be in on this salvation action, this salvation business, when y'all are enemies? And you're going to be in slavery to us. I just read it to you. All right. So, no, man, the mixed multitude. Oh, and by the way, let's take a look at that. Because when we go to, Numbers 11, this is what the mixed multitude did. The mixed multitude, when you read about it, we're going to go there next, Exodus 24. All right, and I think Exodus 24. But when you go here, the mixed multitude, this is what they did. And the mixed multitude that was among them, that them is referring to us, the Israelites, fell a lusting. They troubled us. They were a snare unto us. They were a stumbling block unto us. And the children of Israel also wept again and said, who shall give us flesh to eat? The mixed multitude was a snare. Okay? Then the foreign rabble, right? These ragamuffins, man. These hoodlums, whatever you want to call them. Okay, hoodlum heathens. There's a ring to it. Who were traveling with the Israelites. They're not us. They're traveling with us though. They wanted to. It's multiple places in the scriptures where the heathen, the natural born heathen, want to attach themselves to us. But that's never going to work except in the context of them being slaves and servants to us. That's it. It'll work in that context, right? And in the kingdom of heaven, that's exactly what it's going to be. Okay? The Israelites began to crave the good things of Egypt, right? Because they were stirring us up to want to go back to Egypt. They were a snare. That was it. They were, when Moses, let's go there to Exodus 24. So what I'm showing you is you don't have a leg to stand on. None. Not even a half of a leg. Okay? And when it talks about all that stuff, that was Israel only. Okay? Moses sprinkled the blood on the people. You can read about it here. The people he sprinkled the blood on was 100% Israelites. And he said unto Moses that he is our father Yahweh. Come up unto Yahweh, thou and Aaron, Nadab and Abihu, and 70 of the elders of Israel, and worship ye afar off. And Moses alone shall come near Yahweh, but they shall not come nigh. Neither shall the people go up with him, the people of Israel. Okay, and Moses came and told the people all the words of Yahweh and all the judgments, and all the people answered with one voice, the people is us, Israel. There's no heathen here. Okay, and you read it, this is all Israel. Okay, look at that. According to the 12 tribes of Israel, into verse 4. Okay, and he sent young men of the sons of Israel, which offered burnt offerings and sacrificed peace offerings of oxen unto Yahweh. Right? Let's see. And Moses took half of the blood and put it in the basins, and half of the blood he sprinkled on the altar. And okay, the people, that's us, the Israelites, all that Yahweh has said, we do, and be obedient. You go back to the promises. You go back to the covenant that our father Yahweh made with Abraham, and it's nothing in there about any heathen. It's all your seed. It's all your seed, which is the sons of Abraham, down through Isaac, the son of the promise, down through Jacob, and the 12 patriarchs. There's nothing there about any covenants for the heathen. Okay, and Moses took the blood and sprinkled it on the people. The people is Israel, the people who our father Yahweh refers to all over the place in the Bible as my people. Okay, Israel. And behold, the blood of the covenant. The covenants are only for Israel. Okay, we already broke down Romans 9, but let's just drive that point home again. Romans 9. For I could wish that myself were cursed from Hamashiach, from my brethren. I told you. Now, in this context here, he's talking about, because I did tell you that there's two boxes. The first box is that you share the same forefathers. And yes, you can call someone your brother who checks just that box. Okay, but whenever the Apostle Paul is writing to the believers at Corinth and Thessalonica and all these other places, that first box is not sufficient in that context. He's calling them brothers because they also check the second box. But you can call someone a brother who checks only the first box. But if they check only the second box, no. And I say it's suspect that they check the second box. I don't think they do. Okay, but even if they were to check the second box, which I don't believe it, but even if they were, that's not sufficient. They got to check the first and the second box. But here, he's talking about sharing the same forefathers. For I could wish that myself, in other words, they're Israelites. For I could wish that myself were cursed from Hamashiach, for my brethren, my kinsmen, according to the flesh, proving to you that they share the same forefathers, because this is a brotherhood according to the flesh. That's the reason why, in this context, you only need to check one box. The first one. Checking the second one, not sufficient. Checking the first one, that's sufficient in this context. Who are Israelites? To whom pertaineth, let me see what the NLT says. Yes. Right? Right. Yes. They are the people of Israel, chosen to be the Most High's adopted children, sons. Okay? If you understand adoption in the etymology of the meaning of the word, it's used today in the modern English different than its original meaning. The original meaning is to be brought back again, really kind of like a reconciliation. All right, whereas in the modern English, it's used in the sense of being basically joined for the first time. Okay, you're adopted, you're joined to a family for the first time. You were never a part of this family, but now you're part of that family. That's not the original meaning of the word. That's just the way it's used in modern time. The original meaning of the word was more of a reconciliation, or a reconciliation. In other words, you're being brought back again. Okay, but that's for Israel. Okay. And the covenants and the glory and the covenants is only two covenants, and they're both for who? Who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants, both for Israel, and the giving of the law and the service of the Most High and the promises, all for Israel. Okay? So this covenant here, behold the blood of the covenant, the middle of verse 8, which Yahweh hath made with you. Who's the you? Well, Apostle Paul, man. Who are Israel, to whom pertaineth the covenants? The you is Israel concerning all these words. There's no heathen here. Let me see here. And the 70 elders of Israel, And they saw the power of Israel, okay, the God of Israel, right? And so on and so forth. And upon the nobles of the sons of Israel. This is all Israel. There's no heathen here, man. Okay? You see here. And that's all I wanted to show you. Because when you go back over here to 1 Corinthians 10, this is all Israel. This is nothing to do with any mixed multitude. This has nothing to do with any foreign rabble, any hoodlum heathen, right? This is all Israel. And all the believers at Corinth, they were all Israelites. That's the reason why the Apostle Paul could say how that all our fathers were under the cloud. All right? Now, I mean, just leave it alone, man. Don't try to say anything about any of these believers being heathen, okay? Because if that was the case, then the Apostle Paul wouldn't be calling them brethren, and he wouldn't be saying all our fathers were under the cloud. Or in other words, all of our fathers were delivered from ancient Egypt. All of our fathers entered into the covenant with the Most High. They're all Israelites, okay? And their great grandfathers have been forcibly Hellenized during the Greek captivity, and we've already covered that history. All right? And now they're being brought back through the blood of Yahushua Mashiach. Okay? And so I was going to get a little bit more, but that is sufficient, right? Let's go over to Ephesians 2, and let's prove that the Ephesians are the believers at Ephesus were Israelites as well. All right, and we've already proved it, but we're going to prove it again tonight. Okay, we already got down through 7, 8, and 9, and now we're going to get 10, 11, and 12, and this is going to prove it further again, because we're just proving this. We're proving all these things many times over. For we are his workmanship, created in Hamashiach Yahushai unto good works, which the Most High hath before ordained that we should walk in them. Okay? The proof is everywhere. It really is. Okay? Before ordained. Israel, man. Okay? Wherefore, remember that ye being in time past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision, in the flesh, made by hands. See, now this is similar to 1 Corinthians 12 and 2. Ye know that ye were Gentiles carried away unto these dumb idols, even as ye were led. That right there proves that these are Israelites. Okay? Because they were carried away. If they were carried away unto these dumb idols, then what does that mean? They didn't start there. Then where did they start? Well, if they didn't start with the idols, then come on. They must have started with the Most High, the one true God, the one true power, and then they were carried away. Right. Because they were Israelites. Okay? Serving the Most High. All right? And then they got carried away into these dumb idols, even as ye were led. Ye know that ye were, past tense, when you were following these dumb idols, okay, when you were living like the Greeks, ye were Gentiles. Ye were Greeks. Ye were Gentiles. Okay? If you are a natural born Gentile, if you are a natural born Greek, which at that time of the Hellenization, the Greeks were the Edomites, how can you ever be in past time a Greek? A Gentile? How can you ever stop being what you truly are according to your lineage, your heritage, your bloodline? Answer, you cannot. No one in modern day pagan Christianity ever refers to someone of any nation as no longer being of that nation just because they now believe in G-Bus. Just because they got their ticket to ride on the G-Bus, they are now, oh, you was a Chinese person, but now you're not a Chinese person. Oh, you was a Hamite, half African, but now you're not. Oh, you was an Arab, but now you're not an Arab. Nobody even talks like that. If you were a natural born Gentile and you pray to Jebus and get on the G-bus, you still a natural born Gentile. If you were a natural born Gentile and you change your religious belief to whatever religious belief you want to be, you're still whatever nation that you was before you changed your belief. You didn't get no blood transfusion. And even if you did get a blood transfusion, and you changed all the blood in your body, that doesn't change your bone marrow. Well, let's say, I'm going to get a bone marrow transplant. Okay, fine. You change it. It doesn't change the spirit that indwells your body. Okay? The spirit that indwells your body is determined off of your original bloodline. Let's throw that word original in there. Okay? It's determined off of your original bloodline, and that determines who you are. Okay? If you were of a certain nation, you're always of that certain nation. No one ever even talks like you're not. Okay? So how in the world here are these believers at Corinth, and how in the world are these believers at Ephesus in times past Gentiles, but now they're not? Because it's talking about them being Gentiles spiritually speaking. Gentiles in a Gentile state of mind. Okay? So they became Gentiles, and now they've repented and returned back to our Father, Yahweh, returned back to their heritage, and now they're not Gentiles in their mind anymore. They're no longer spiritually speaking Gentiles. That's how. No one talks about it nobody even speaks like this in a literal sense. Okay? So don't try to do it now. Okay? Ye know that ye were Gentiles, carried away into these dumb idols. But now that you've forsaken those idols and returned back to your power, Yahweh, through his only begotten son, Yahweh Shai, well, now you're not a Gentile anymore. Now you've returned back to who you truly are, which is a Israelite. See? And the Israelites that were Gentiles, because they were in a Gentile, heathen, foreign, strange state of mind, they were following the customs of the Greeks, they were referred to as the uncircumcision because they were uncircumcised in heart. And many of them were uncircumcised in the flesh. Okay, they weren't. Matter of fact, when we were first Hellenized in the Greek captivity, we already got this history. Check out the previous parts. If their mothers circumcised their if the mothers, the daughters of Zion who had young babies, if they circumcised their babies on the 8th day in accordance with the law, the mother and the baby were killed. And we got examples of that. So they weren't circumcising themselves. Okay? But they were called the uncircumcision because, yeah, they were uncircumcised in the flesh, but primarily, even more so, because they were uncircumcised at heart. That which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands, because those that held fast, they continued to circumcise themselves in the flesh, and they were circumcised in the heart. So the uncircumcision and the circumcision are both Israelites. The uncircumcision was the Israelites who were in a foreign, strange, heathen state of mind. The circumcision were the Israelites that clung to and held fast to the large commandments and statutes and held to our customs and our heritage. Both the uncircumcision and the circumcision are Israelites. That at that time, ye were without a Mashiach, being aliens. That word aliens is also going to prove that these are Israelites. And I'm going to show you that in a second. From the commonwealth of Israel and strangers. Two groups of strangers. Okay? These strangers are Israelites, as we've already proven. But we're going to prove it again one more time, and then I'm going to wrap it for tonight. Okay? And strangers from the covenants of promise. Okay? Which those covenants of promise, the covenants and the promises are for who? Israel. Having no hope and without the Most High in the world. Okay? But now, through the shed blood of Yahweh Shah Mashiach, which this was our Father Yahweh's plan all along. Because when he cut off, when those Greeks became Hellenized and they were now alienated, which we're going to get that word aliens, okay? that was always going to be just temporary. This was the plan of our Father. When the northern kingdom was cut off, it was never permanent. Oh, it seemed permanent. It looked permanent. Our people back during that time thought it was permanent. But that's because they didn't really understand the prophecies. Okay, that's why it was a mystery. Okay, which was now being revealed, as the Apostle Paul put it. Okay, they thought it was permanent, but no, it wasn't permanent. If you really understood the prophecies and you studied the prophecies, you should have known it wasn't. But it was hidden. It was hidden. It was hidden in plain sight, but it was hidden. Then ultimately, the southern kingdom got cut off. Southern kingdom got cut off, and now the whole nation's cut off. But it's permanent. Slip of the tongue. But it was always temporary. This was our Father's plan. Okay? And now the whole nation's being brought back. All right? And strangers from the covenants of promise, having no hope and without the Most High in the world. Let's look at that word for aliens. Okay? Because that word for aliens is going to further again prove that these are Israelites. What does it mean to be aliens? Oh, I know. It means that you don't have any, it means that you're like separate. No, I won't say separate. It means that you're kind of like, that you don't have anything to do with it. Well, it goes further than that. To alienate, estrange, to be shut out from one's fellowship and intimacy. That's what you would think, right? And that is true. But it has a root word here, and the root word drives it home even further. Okay? That's not the one I wanted to click on. Here it is. Yes. Okay? And here's the pronunciation.
Strong's G 575. Apa.
Right? And let's look here. How many times is this word? 671 times. A lot of times. Okay? Let's look at some of Paul's epistles here. Let's go to 2 Corinthians. Let me see here. It's a lot here. I don't want to spend a lot of time looking for a good example. Actually, let me see here. I think this will make it easy. No, it doesn't. But anyway, there's good examples to show you. But the reason why I clicked on the root word is because all of the meaning of the root word, let me go back to the original word. Here's the original word, right? The root word is included because all of the meaning of the root word is wrapped up and included in the meaning of the word that comes from it. Okay? So in other words, if you just read what's here, you don't get the full understanding of what this word means. You have to click on the root word to get the full understanding of what the word means. That's why the root word is there. So you got to do a little work. That's where the studying comes in. Study to show yourself approved, a workman that need not be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth. So we click on the root word to get the full understanding. We click on the root word, and here's what we find out. Now you see the root word here. Sometimes the root word will have a root word, but this root word does not have a root word. So this is as far as you need to go. And we find out that it involves the idea of separation. So when this word is used, and give me a second. Somebody's got some super bright sun blast beam LED lights in my eyes. Man, it's ridiculous. Anyway, it involves the idea of separation. Can you separate something from something that never was? In order to separate something from something else, it had to first be a part of it. Of local separation, of departing, of fleeing. The departing would, or you could say fleeing too. Look at B. Of separation of a part from the whole. So that's telling you when he says being aliens from the commonwealth, that means that the believers at Corinth were separated from those that remained part of the commonwealth. In other words, they used to be part of the commonwealth, but now then they no longer were. but now they're being brought back. Of any kind of separation. You cannot separate something that was not part of the whole in the first place. So if you're going to separate something, that means it was part of the whole in the first place. This is proving to you, again, that the Corinthians were, we already did it for the Corinthians. I meant to say the Ephesians were Israelites. Of any kind of separation of one thing from another, by which the union or fellowship of the two is destroyed, because there was a union and there was a fellowship because they were Israelites. And that's all we needed. See, of separation of a part from the whole. So when we come here and he says, that at that time ye were without Hamashiach, being aliens, being separated from the whole, from the commonwealth of Israel, being separated from the whole, being separated from Israel, because you can't be separated from Israel without first being part of Israel. That's what the word aliens or alienated means. Okay? This proves that they were Israelites. Okay? In times past, Gentiles in the flesh proves that they were Israelites. Okay? And when you understand it, being before ordained that we should walk in. Okay? The proof is everywhere, but it's just that you have to understand it. The world says seeing is believing, but actually believing is seeing. For the just shall walk by faith and not by sight. Okay? So this word aliens here proves that these believers at Ephesus are Israelites, and that they were separated from the commonwealth of Israel because they were originally part of the commonwealth of Israel. But now, then they were separated, but now they're being brought back again, which is what back again, conciliation means. Back again, penance means. Back again. You can't back anything that you didn't first. You can't or back anything that you didn't first do, or go back any place that you weren't first at. Okay? You can't back again anything without having done it or been there first in the first place. That's what reconciliation, repentance means. Okay? They were separated from the commonwealth of Israel, meaning they were first originally part of the commonwealth. Then they were separated. Now they're being brought back again. Back again, conciliation. And so that proves that these, again, we proved this many times. We're proving it again. These believers at Ephesus are Israelites. The believers at Corinth are Israelites. The believers at all these churches, okay? Rome, Colossae, Thessalonica, Corinth, Galatia, Ephesus, Philippi, they were all Israelites by lineage, by heritage, by bloodline, by birth. They have been separated. Now they're being brought back again. Reconciliation. Okay? The ministry of back again, conciliation. All right? And so from there, we're going to move on and get a little bit more and wrap up the groundwork and the foundational work. And then we'll move to the next phase of this lesson series. And we might take a break from it for a little while and get into some other things. We'll see how the Spirit leads. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. Before I do, I want to give all glory, honor, and praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shabbat, Rechak Wadash, double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Much peace, love, respect to the brothers teaching, pushing this truth out the four corners of the earth. Adawan, brother Zadis, that's with edifying, encouraging to you, Achim, and any Achwaf that may be listening and or watching. Ayashmi Akwana, Azanyim Lashemai Shemai. Let him who has ears to hear, Kwam Yasharala, Baba Kusha, Abai Baba Etha, will call Adawam. Shalom Lahavachayim, Shalom.